All right. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Jerry Strauss, of course, and welcome to the very first edition of Marvel Breakdown. Now, this is where we are going to get kind of geeky about the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is just something I've been obsessed with for many a year. And I am going to be talking on these segments with people who are just as obsessed with it as me and probably a lot smarter about it than me. And we've got a great first conversation for you ahead of us, and the perfect person to do it. If you've checked out this channel before, you've seen some interviews, some attempts at interviewing. But if you want to see some real good interviews, if you want to see expert level interviewing, you want to go to my guest's stuff. Sarah O'Connell show.com is a good place to start. She is the one and only Sarah O'Connell. Sarah, how are you?
First of all, thank you for that incredible introduction. And it's been an honor to be invited on the debut episode of this brand new exciting show of yours, Jerry. I'm very good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm excited too. This is so cool, and I'm so like I've been a fan of yours for a while, but I especially am excited about the fact that I know just from following you on social media, as I suggest that everyone do immediately. um, I know that you're a fan of this stuff, just like me. Um, but I'm kind of curious where that comes from because everyone kind of comes to these comic book movies a little bit differently. How much of a fan are you? How long have you been a fan of the MCU and all the characters and everything like that? Where'd that all start for you?
Sure. So I grew up in the 1980s and I pretty much lived in video stores. I would rent all the new releases that came out. There wasn't in the UK, there were only 4 TV channels at the time, and so there wasn't a lot on. But TV shows such as the Incredible Hulk and the A Team and all that kind of stuff, and obviously there weren't many superhero movies in the 1980s. But of course, there was stuff like Superman and there's the classic 60s Batman show and Wonder
Right.
Woman. I just loved all that stuff, and I really was sort of caught up in all the 80s movies, Ghostbusters, Back to the Future, and Goonies, and all of that, and that kind of stayed with me. And as I got older, I went to movie theaters more and more, and would always go and see the latest releases the day they came out, and that got to the point where I was seeing them at midnight, and traveling halfway across the country to see films and stuff like that. And so I've been a huge fan of the MCU since Iron Man came out, and
Yeah.
loved everything that they're doing. If you've seen any episodes of my show, there's been some people from the right from the MCU as well. And yeah, I really love it, and I'm really excited to talk to you about it.
I was thinking earlier, and again, this is the debut of this show, so I had a lot of thoughts running through my head just about how cool this opportunity is to have these kinds of conversations. But I was thinking about how common superhero movies are now, to the point that
Mm.
they kind of dominate the marketplace. But thinking back to, when both of us were younger, and it was so special,
I'm
just
still
the
younger.
opportunity to see like just the original Superman movies or the Hulk on TV, like you said, just to see the characters that we like being portrayed like by real people was like
Mm.
such a cool thing as a kid. Like cartoons, yeah, they were kind of commonplace, but to see it like for real, like to see somebody acting that out and looking like those characters, like we definitely are used to it now, and maybe a little bit jaded by it, but it was a really special thing back then.
It really was. And, mentioning the Incredible Hulk TV show, you had Lou Ferrigno actually playing the Incredible Hulk. There was no CGI back then, so they spent hours painting him green,
Yeah.
and he had to manually flip a car over rather than a cartoon car in a film. And things had that level of realness. Movies like The Gremlins, it wasn't CGI, it was puppetry, and it just really captured my imagination back then. And films still do that now, but in different ways. And I think it's nice when current films honor where they come from in the past, and but also I'm really excited to see all the new stuff they're doing creatively as well.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, again, we all kind of these movies are so nuanced and so rich and so deep that I think we enjoy them in different ways. What I wanted to do with this show, and we talked about this before, is the fact that there's so many shows out there. If you want to hear people talking about very nuanced details about movies, about how they relate to maybe the comic books and the stories they're based on, and you know all, just all the different little Easter eggy things that you're going to find in different comic book movies, because so many people love that stuff. You're going to find that elsewhere. But, to me, what attracts me back to these movies back and back again, um, are the characters and just
Mm.
how well their stories and their journeys play out, especially specifically in the MCU, where so many of these stories, I mean, it's unbelievable. They've been intertwining for what, 15 years now almost? The MCU's been going on. It's
Yeah.
all still very connected in one really a big story. And that's sort of what I wanted to explore with this show. Is that like how do you when you first go see, say, Shang Chi, um like what jumps out at you for a movie like that? Are you looking at the story first, or are you excited to kind of compare it to maybe what you know about the history of the character, or
Mm.
like where's your head at?
So I was quite excited to see Shang-Chi because, first of all, I knew it was kind of a tribute to Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon, and that there was a tournament kind of thing going on and lots of martial arts, and they hadn't really done that in
Right.
the MCU before. I was excited to learn more about these characters. I didn't know a massive amount about them. I've like read a little bit, but that was kind of it. I've not read the comics or anything like that. So I really was coming into this fresh.
Yeah.
I was excited to see which new storylines they were setting up for the future, because phase 4 of the MCU is still very much unknown, still feeling the ramifications of phase 3 with the Infinity War and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And also, as you say, how just in small ways that the film was intertwined with the fabric of that universe, and how, if the film was affected in any way by the other films that have come out or the Disney Plus shows, and also what New York's going to bring to the table too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's personally, that's what I look forward to about every new chapter, every new Disney Plus show, every new movie that comes out, is how is the story going to carry forward, intertwine, and maybe relate back to what we've seen before. So, again, I don't think this is the show where we're going to be discussing this certain weapon that was used in this movie, and that's a callback to a movie 3 years ago, and like that
Mm.
is not something I personally have the brain for at all. But I mean, I just love the idea and the concept here of this show. This is our very first one. Every time out, we're going to just isolate one of the characters that you guys love, that we love, and we're going to break down their journey from beginning to end. And I think it's really interesting from a creative perspective to say, well, this is where they started, this is their road, through different writers, different directors, different maybe creative changes. And how well did that journey hold up? How much did it make sense? How
Mm.
did that beginning lead to the middle, lead to the end, or just continue on? And you picked a really high level one to start with. Do you want to talk about what led to you making your choice for our episode this time?
Sure. Well, the first thing I thought was that I felt like Iron Man was too obvious. I thought someone's just going to go for Iron Man. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to really think about all the different characters and why they interested me.
Mhm.
And I wanted someone also that had a long history in the MCU, not someone that, say, Wanda would have been a great person to talk about, but she's really sort of come into her own in the TV show. But I thought it'd be interesting to explore a character that had been there almost from the beginning. I believe The Incredible Hulk was the second movie released. So
Mhm.
there's a long character arc there to explore. So I thought that'd be really interesting. Plus, as I say, I used to love the TV show in the 1980s, and I watched the Ang Lee version in 2003, and I was looking forward to the reimagination in 2008. And I think it's just a really interesting story, not just what was told in the films, but just what's happened behind the scenes with the character as well.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's probably the character that's had the most uphill battle it could have, not just on screen, but again, just sort of the through the creative aspect of, from start back to this movie that we're going to start
Mm,
things off with back in 2008 all the way to now. I mean, an uphill battle when you're talking about a straight up change in who's playing the character. This is something that
exactly.
no other character on this level had to deal with in the MCU. So, um, bold choice, Sarah. Very bold choice.
Thank you.
So, listen, I mean, and let's get started. And
Mm,
we're not going to get too detailed into any of these stops, but I just want to talk about really where this character, of course, Bruce Banner, is in all these different places throughout his story. And The Incredible Hulk, the movie, eh, as you said, it's the second movie in the MCU, right? So
yep.
Iron Man comes out. It's a story that's almost entirely about his world, with just a glimpse into the fact that there's more at the very end. Um, of course, Nick Fury, the Avengers Initiative. Now we know there's going to be a whole world of MCU out there. But this is the second shot fired after this very successful Iron Man.
Yeah.
Um, and it's really an interesting way to start, because it's not that long after this movie comes out that we find out that it's gonna kind of be reinvented. I don't remember the exact timeline of how long it was after the movie was released before it's announced um, that we're gonna have a change in actor going forward for Bruce Banner. But I kind of remember thinking, well, that's kind of an explosion of the franchise, so to speak, right then and there. Like, it felt like it was almost a nail in the coffin of what they tried to do
Mm.
right out of the gate. Is that like a feeling that you got after the movie came out?
Yeah, because when Iron Man first came out, I loved that they were doing all this world building in the background. You mentioned Shang Chi just now. The Ten Rings are mentioned in the first Iron Man movie,
Yeah,
and obviously Nick Fury wants to speak about the Avengers Initiative at the end of it, and they obviously hoped to be able to build up to the point where they were doing this Avengers movie, and then say the next heavy hitter out, as you say, is the Incredible Hulk. And I thought Ed Norton was pretty good as Bruce Banner, and then yeah, when he kind of left and there was obviously a lot of problems between the two camps, I wondered if it was going to put the Avengers in jeopardy, what was going to happen with it, and also would any new Bruce Banner even be able to fit in? Would he be accepted with the fans, or what was going to happen? Would he be phased out? Were
yeah,
they just going to bring him into the Avengers just to kill him off for some reason?
yeah.
Which I knew
It,
could happen because the 1970 series did a whole movie about that.
Yeah, yeah. I and that I used to love those movies because, again, I not to get off topic, but I remember like those occasional TV movies with the Hulk,
Mm.
and maybe I think like one had Daredevil in it. Like, it
One
was
had
a win.
Thor.
Yes, yeah, and it was like this window to other characters, and that was all we had, so that was,
Mm,
like, such a an amazing treat back then. But at the same time, the fact that we have so many more on such a larger stage now means that the standard for quality has gone up a lot more beyond what we saw on NBC in prime time back in the '80s, so that's a good thing. Um, but yeah, it definitely felt like this movie, and I'll be honest with you, I have never seen The Incredible. This is the only piece of the MCU that I have never seen in full. I've seen chunks of it. I saw the beginning of it, but there
mm,
were many years where the common consensus after that movie came out and after they changed casting, there's a common consensus that it wasn't even canon anymore, that it wasn't really going to, moving forward, be referenced back, or a lot of people felt like it was just something that the MCU would likely ignore and treat
mm.
the Avengers movie as the real kind of coming out party of Bruce Banner. So I just didn't personally see a need to go back for it. And even in preparation for this show, it's not on a streaming platform here in
No,
the
it's
US.
not.
No, it's not.
It's very true. It's
It's
not. It's not on Disney Plus in the UK. I
it
don't think.
is not. It's because it must be caught up in the weird rights thing with Universal, and it's just one of those things. Um, but yeah, I mean, as you said, we did first meet Bruce Banner in this movie. We did get a glimpse of the origin story that we all kind of know and love. They didn't really harp on it, which is kind of a
Mm.
thing with Marvel. They tend to not beat us over the head with the origin stories. We never were truly told Spider-Man's origin story here in the MCU.
We don't know how Uncle Ben is at all.
No, no, he might live around the corner. we
That'd be
were,
wild, wouldn't it?
um, but still, we get to meet Bruce, played by Ed Norton.
Mm.
Um, you like the performance of Ed Norton. From the little bit I've seen, I feel like maybe it was a bit of a different approach with Bruce, because in this first movie, it really felt like he was, as I don't want to say plain, but he was the ultimate kind of just straight man. Like he didn't play into much comedy in the movie. Like he was pretty
Mm.
serious without being too intense. He was just trying to survive and deal with the world that has kind of surrounded him, with him becoming the Hulk. But compared to what we would see later on from later iterations of Bruce Banner, I mean, would it be wrong to say he was kind of boring?
Well, I don't know. I felt that in that first movie, they were kind of paying tribute a bit to the TV show that came before it. I felt that if there were more movies, we would have had scenes of him going to different towns and helping people and hulking out and all that kind of thing, and spending more time with the character.
Mhm.
And as you say, it was the first film, so we got all that gamma ray stuff and him just working out what his powers were. And then, of course, the government goes after him, and then they make another one because that's how you solve a problem. Just
Right.
make two Hulks. It's like
We
when
see
Tony Stark made Ultron and then fixed it by making Vision. So
Yeah.
they never learn.
Alpha
Yeah,
males, man. I bet none of them ask for directions when they're lost either. They just
exactly.
um so yeah, I mean, if you go back to sort of
Mm.
the critical response to that movie, I think there's, even before the casting switch, maybe a bit of a general feeling that the movie was a bit on the dull side. And keep in mind, this is comparing it to the movie that just came before it, in Iron Man, with one of
Yeah.
the most entertaining lead characters ever. So when you go from him to Bruce Banner, played by Ed Norton, a lot less jokey, just a lot more inherently, because anybody would be. So it was kind of a tough act to follow.
Yeah, I think Bruce Banner inherently just brings a different energy to him. He's a lot more chilled out, and that's kind of the point. You want to see that difference between him and the Incredible Hulk. You
Yeah,
should feel like, how can this person become that angry?
yeah,
And so, yeah, it definitely didn't have the humor that Iron Man had, and that probably worked against it. And I do wonder. I was thinking about this earlier on. If the film didn't perform that well, could be why Universal's been hesitant to pour all that money in again. Because remember, they had only just made a film 5 years before that, Hulk, the Ang Lee version.
right.
So they'd probably spent quite a bit of money on that franchise at that time.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It was just decided at that point. Certainly, we haven't seen a Hulk movie since.
Mm,
Strangely enough, just within the last couple days, just to put a bit of a timestamp on this, there have
I
been
know.
rumors,
Mm.
but we'll see. At this point, the MCU schedule is so stacked and extended out even more than before, that anything new on the horizon, it's going to be a few years before we see it anyway.
I
Um,
think so, but we will get to that. If we're going through these chronologically, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
sure. But I mean, just going back to, and again, we don't need to go through the whole plot of this movie, but there is a theme here that I think is really interesting as it relates to Bruce Banner, which
Mm,
does carry through, I think, to his personality all the way through the time that we know him, which is that when he gets stressed, when things get worrisome, when things get hot, he runs. His solution, and you can't blame the guy, but his solution throughout his entire history, um, is to protect those around him by running from them. So he
mm.
basically a globetrotter, much like in the TV show, always looking for that safe place to land where he can lay low and not hurt people. And we see that time and time again. This is just the start of it.
Yeah, I'd say to leap forwards a bit, then the biggest example of that would be Avengers Age of Ultron. At the end of the movie, he decides he doesn't want to inadvertently injure Black Widow in any way and gets on that Quinjet and blasts off into space,
Yeah.
not to conveniently be seen for several more movies where he could have been needed.
Yeah. That was kind of a big trip.
Mm-hmm.
Space. And just to run down, we are introduced to some characters here who, again, for a long time it was heavily rumored or just assumed that we'd never see most of these characters again, that this was done and dusted, and this world would kind of be buried. We're
Yeah.
finding out that's not the case. General Ross, we've seen him pop up again and again. As it relates to the Sokovia Accords and just being a part of the MCU in general.
Mm.
And Annihilation, which was the big bad that the Hulk fought at the end of this movie.
Abomination.
Abominate. What did I say?
Annihilation.
Oh my God. Sorry. But Abomination, really cool looking. And, I think a cool scene, maybe the highlight of this movie, from what I could gather. If there's a reason to go back and check it out, it was cool to see Hulk and the Abomination destroy Harlem, which is referenced in the Avengers, that he did kind of break Harlem. But we did see him, in Shang Chi, resurface, and it's been said, I think it's pretty much on the books at this point, that there's going to be more revisiting of this world once we get to the She-Hulk Disney
Yeah,
Plus series.
I've heard that Abomination's going to be in there too, and I'm really curious to know what they're doing with that character. Aside from the visual upgrades, I think he's more comic book accurate now and has like fin things on his head or something. But it doesn't seem like he's necessarily a villain. He's been working with Wong, is it? And like training together or something. I think he's still a prisoner though.
Well, yeah, there
And
was that the contest. I don't know if is it too early for spoilers on Shang-Chi? I mean, is it
so
late
that's in
enough?
the trailer. I think that's out. I think that counts.
Oh, okay, we're cool then. Yeah,
Yeah, the two of them fighting is literally in the trailer.
gotcha. Okay,
And it's the only scene of them in the movie. I think they put it in there to put it in the trailer.
yeah. So anyway, long story short, interesting start to the character, and a notable one, because like many other corners of the MCU that and again, I'll even go back to, on a different topic, like Thor: The Dark World is a movie that you know I think a lot of people think is a bit one of the lesser movies, maybe not one that would necessarily be looked at as a favorite or to draw upon, but we've had plenty of callbacks even to that movie. So I think what we've learned over the years is every single part of the MCU, no matter how old it is, no matter what people think about it, it's important. It's a building block going forward, this movie included. And then we don't see Bruce Banner again until we swing back around for the very first Avengers movie. And that is the very first time we see Mark Ruffalo take on the role of Bruce Banner. He's run again, and we find him, or Natasha Romanoff finds him in Kolkata. And he's out there again, just kind of laying low while still trying to do good. That's kind of a hallmark of Bruce Banner, right?
I think that's what most people try to do. Just lay low, try and do good stuff, Don't flip a bus over.
That's kind of what goes through my head pretty much at least once a week. Just run away, go somewhere safe, and don't turn over any buses.
Yeah.
People, I think fans immediately gravitated towards Mark Ruffalo. I mean, he was definitely embraced pretty positively taking over this role. What do you think are even some small differences that you can see in the portrayals between the two actors?
Well, I think the first thing we got to see was just the dynamic between Bruce Banner and the Avengers. And there was some great dialogue throughout the film. And of course, the Hulk was infinitely better in the Avengers, I'd say it's one of his best appearances. Obviously, the end scene with Loki was the standout moment of the entire movie for me.
Yeah.
And as I said, yeah, he just had more chemistry, and the Hulk looks better, and it was quite comic book accurate, I think, too. And he was a strong character at that point. He wasn't necessarily running away from everything. He was the game changer in that movie a lot of the time.
Throughout the yeah, and you could see some of that progression even through the movie because, I mean, he has hidden himself in the world when we first meet him. They bring him aboard under the idea that we just need you for your mind. We don't need you to be the Hulk. I think that character would have been kind of suspicious of that from the get-go. And Tony Stark is essentially poking the bear from the moment he walks in the room with him, hoping that eventually we do get that chaos that he that
Mm,
he loves. um, but we also get to see him kind of for the first time pulled into uh sort of the craziness and not the paranoia, but certainly that idea of questioning authority that Tony Stark brings to the table, because he tries to pull Bruce in pretty much immediately, to kind of look under the hood at what Shield is doing and the suspicions that they're doing some things without telling all the Avengers what's going on as far as experimenting. Um, and Bruce is very reluctant. He doesn't want to rock any boats.
mm.
He just wants to do what he's asked to do so he can be kind of left alone. He's very reluctant, but he does get pulled in, and he does kind of begin to stand up on his own and realize there is something to what's going on here. And you see him kind of taking control of himself, taking control of his surroundings, and in the end taking control kind of the Hulk.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about Bruce Banner too is he's the only character really that's kind of the match for Tony Stark. Tony Stark is very intelligent, so is Bruce Banner as well. He's a scientist, and he can help out the team in lots of different ways. And that he's not doing anything to wind anyone up or annoy them. He's just doing things that he genuinely thinks will help the team.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he's definitely I mean, he's pure. There's I don't want to say there's not much of a personality, but there's no facade with him. Like, he's just like broken down to this pure guy who just wants to do what's right. And
Mm,
it's a bit of a callback. We do have that moment at the very end, going back to the Incredible Hulk movie, where we see him seemingly willingly turning into the Hulk and give a bit of a smile to indicate that there is some sort of a connection now between Banner and the Hulk. He's had some sort of
mm,
control. And that's one of my very favorite parts of the Avengers, is that moment where he says, that his secret is that he's always
yeah.
angry. And he just can channel it in order to turn into the Hulk. Now, we're going to find out, even going forward, he doesn't necessarily have full control while he is the Hulk, but he is at least able to control, at least make himself at times um, transform on command, which is
Mm.
a pretty badass moment in that movie.
And to me, we didn't get enough of that version of Bruce Banner and the Incredible Hulk. I don't think we had enough movies where there was that dynamic where you had this pacifist and then this, rage machine running around. And they
Mhm.
kind of diluted him, I think, a bit too early. I think it would have been great to see more of the Hulk at his peak.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what makes this whole story we're talking about so interesting, because he
Mm,
has not had a movie of his own beyond that first one. So it's
yeah.
almost like every few years we're just kind of checking in on him. So, we'll see that the story, is necessarily a little bit choppier than, say, Steve Rogers or Tony Stark, where they get a lot more time to focus on it. So the Avengers, um, I mean, that we see him obviously participate with this whole mission, this whole war, the Avengers coming together, and Bruce being able to voluntarily step into the role of the Hulk, help the Avengers save the day. And that's kind of it with him. We don't really know where he's going from there at that moment, besides going out to eat some shawarma with the rest of the crew
Yeah.
at the end. And that's the last time that we see him, until the very next time is that I believe it was a mid-credits scene in Iron Man 3, if you
Yeah, that's
remember.
right. So there's a scene that starts off with Tony Stark, and he's obviously speaking to a therapist and telling them his life story, and then says, "You're an amazing therapist. You're really good at what you do." And then the camera cuts over to Bruce Banner, who's asleep. He's missed the entire thing. And then Tony Stark's somewhat disgruntled for a second, but then he just thinks back to another memory and starts talking about himself again, like he hasn't really noticed. It was a fun throwaway scene that kind of catches up with the character and just shows that they're still in each other's lives.
Yeah.
But that scene also showed that Tony Stark didn't actually understand what it was that he did.
Right. What kind of doctor he
Mm,
was. And I think it showed that Tony Stark has very few friends,
mm,
the people
yeah.
he can call on. But the other thing I think it did show, as small and as insignificant and as, just a funny little off scene that it was, but I think it was the first truly comedic scene with Bruce Banner, especially with Mark Ruffalo. And I think it showed us, Bruce Banner is never going to be a comedic character, I don't think. But I believe Mark Ruffalo is very good at making Bruce Banner a guy that can be in scenes that are very funny because of the people around him. He plays
Mm,
very well comedically, and we've seen a lot of really funny stuff surrounding the Bruce Banner character ever since. That was kind of our first taste of it, but it was it was a
yeah.
great little teaser.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And skipping way ahead to like Avengers Endgame at the beginning of that, there's a few funny scenes when we catch up with the character and they're all in a restaurant. And
Yeah.
so I think the character, because of who he is, just naturally invites comedic situations.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. He's become such a more well-rounded, in sort of that classic MCU style. He's, there's not that many MCU characters that reach that height of popularity without some sort of comedic edge to them as well,
Mm,
plus the ability to tell serious stories. And I think that's kind of a commonality of, everyone from Tony Stark to Thor to everybody that has
mm. But
been sort of the major.
I think the thing that Bruce Banner offers that the other ones don't is that any film that he's in is inherently a monster movie.
Right. That is true on his own,
Yeah.
which kind of makes me wonder if maybe that's sort of the difficulty also creatively in doing another Hulk movie before the time is right. It feels like it's just so tempting to be able to mix that character up. He works so well, like playing off of other characters,
Mm.
that he's such an important part of the Avengers movies, and so great in Thor Ragnarok. We'll get there, but yeah, I mean, maybe it's we just want him to be entertaining too. And so we've gotten plenty of that, luckily, from him. Um, the next movie is a really big one for him, and maybe one that I think fans question the most when it comes to his
Mm.
evolution. Age of Ultron. We see the Avengers. This is probably them in the beginning of this movie at their most stable. This is like a time when they're fully formed from the prior movie. Now they're just the Avengers together on a mission when we first catch up with them. Bruce is the Hulk once again. We see some time has passed and they've gelled as a team. But we see something else as far as Bruce Banner goes, because there's this blossoming chemistry between himself and Natasha Romanoff that we've just
Yeah.
never really had a chance to tease before. It came out of nowhere.
It really did come out of nowhere, and it was kind of odd because there was this relationship with Betty Ross in the Incredible Hulk movie, Liv Tyler, who
Yeah.
kind of isn't referenced again, I don't think. And yeah, as you say, there's at the beginning of this movie, suddenly they're kind of hinting at a relationship. Then by
Mhm.
the end of the movie, it's never referenced again so much until Avengers Endgame, I think. And yeah, it kind of came out of nowhere and felt oddly out of place, I think, even though they'd only been in a few movies. It seemed a bit forced to me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and again, like, I think we're just so used to the idea of these things happening progressively, gradually
Yeah.
over a period of time. And there was just, I mean, there was no opportunity for teasing it. But I mean, even in the original Avengers movie, they did interact, they were together. There was no time for any romances to blossom, especially since that movie took place over the course of what, a day or two.
Yeah,
so
pretty much.
so I mean, it was what it was, but they just decided to kind of make that a big crux of the movie. And I mean, I think it's really a big part of the movie is diving deeper into Bruce's growing, ever growing fear about what kind of place he could have around people he cares about, that common
Mm.
theme. So, as he and Natasha get closer throughout this movie, he's starting to worry that much more about whether he should be close to her, whether he can be around her, whether they should be near other people. Like it's just
Yeah.
it's that direction, and it's this soap opera sort of situation that's created out of nowhere again. But I mean, how did you
Yeah.
feel about the chemistry between those two for that movie?
It was okay. As I say, to me, it felt kind of out of place. But just thinking back on it now, I feel like it was probably crowbarred in there just to explain writing him out of the storyline at the end of it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
probably why that happened.
I mean, not to second guess, successful writers of some of the most successful movies of all time. I mean, theoretically, from the chair I'm sitting in here in my basement, I could certainly see a situation where the romance isn't necessary and he just chooses to do that because of overwhelming guilt about just general damage that he causes, or accidentally maybe hurting somebody innocent. Or I mean, I feel like there would have been other ways to go with that, but there seemed to be at that point a really distinct desire to create that romantic, that chemistry between the two of them. And you have to
Yeah.
wonder if maybe there was some intent to follow up on it that just kind of got canned.
Yeah, maybe they were just trying to take the characters in a new direction and it didn't prove particularly popular, or I don't know. But looking at the comics, from what I understand of them, is that so obviously when he flies away at the end of Age of Ultron
Mhm.
and then goes into space, that happens in the comics too. There was a comic book series called Planet Hulk where he's caused too much damage on Earth, I think, and he's tricked into going into space by saying he's saving people or rescuing people or something in space, and then he finds that he's been blasted off somewhere else and it goes wrong, and he ends up on this gladiatorial war planet. And so that's kind of what happened in the comics to explain why he was in space. But I think they also just wanted to write him out of the Civil War storyline because he would have been too much of a game changer, probably.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He would
Mm.
tip the scales,
Yeah.
so to speak. And that's kind of his journey here. You've alluded to it. Is they once again win the day. They overcome Ultron. Um, but in the end, instead of taking what would have been the clear opportunity now for he and for Black Widow to just leave, run away, have a life
Mm.
together, which, she seemed to have been all in on at that point. Like that's how
Right.
fast this romance escalated, which is pretty insane when, we'll have our episode eventually about Natasha and talk about everything that goes into her. Seems a bit crazy, impetuous for her. Um, but instead, he takes a different route as the Hulk. He does it as the Hulk, but
Mm.
I mean, seemingly with enough of Bruce Banner's mind, um, allowing him to make that decision that he is going to just leave the planet, get out of
Yeah.
Dodge, and find a new life. And we don't see him again until Thor Ragnarok, which, you talked about that comic book storyline, the Planet Hulk, the gladiatorial
Mm.
situation. Um, a lot of that feels like it was folded into where we find him here because
It really
uh,
was. Yeah.
Thor, he ends up on this planet Sakaar, which is, essentially the big event that's going on there is this big, what would you call it? An arena, I guess, a gladiatory, a gladiator arena where they have these giant battles, and Thor has been there seemingly for some time, just as Hulk, not
Yeah.
Bruce Banner. And he's settled into this life as Hulk, the heavyweight champion, I guess, of Sakaar.
And
um,
so one interesting thing about that was too that because obviously they couldn't release another solo movie with Mark Ruffalo as the Incredible Hulk,
mm,
which I imagine they wanted to but couldn't work things out with Universal for
yeah,
whatever reason. They decided to do a 3-part character arc over Thor Ragnarok and then the following 2 Avengers movies as well, Infinity War and Endgame. So that's
yeah.
kind of what they did. So he had, if you put all those elements together, he kind of has his own mini movie, if you like. But
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the point of the show. That's what we're kind of trying to put together here is just it's almost like a mixtape, right? Like we're just
mm,
exploring all the cool things that our character of choice for this week did. But yeah, I mean, and again, it's like instead of him getting his own movie, we're just getting these like glimpses catching up with him every
mm,
once in a while. And it's a little jarring at times, but that really starts back in Age of Ultron, where all of a sudden he's kind of hot and heavy with Natasha, and now kind of a lifestyle change here. He's Hulk, he's on another planet, he's kicking everyone's ass, and that's where where Thor finds him. And this is probably his most comedic role or the most comedic look at Bruce Banner to date because as the Hulk, he's evolved into, I mean, I would say a little bit different than the Hulk that we knew in the prior movies that we'd seen him. He's a little bit more verbose, but he's sort of like an 8-year-old child.
yeah,
Like
that's a really
kind
good
of,
way of putting it. Exactly.
yeah, like he can have conversations, he can talk. He's not just raging against everyone around him. He can exist in somewhat of a calm manner. He's just kind of he's like he's like a kid. It's just like, Hulk wants this and Hulk wants that, and Hulk don't like you, and Hulk's not dumb, and
Mm.
just
And
having like these infantile arguments with Thor.
And I think that's probably the catalyst that causes the problem in the movies that follow because he spends so much time as himself. He decides he just wants to be him and he doesn't want to be used by Bruce Banner anymore just when he wants something or to beat somebody up.
Yeah, it's and the overarching theme as we get into it, which I don't know if it was focused that much in some of the earlier things we mentioned, but this idea that the Hulk and Bruce, in theory, all the way up until Endgame, are almost like two separate people who are
Mm,
fighting for control of this body. So it's like this wacky buddy comedy almost, kind of almost like what we see in Venom, where they're just like arguing with each other. They have spats. They they don't talk for a while. Um, and that's what we kind of see. And then we see sort of a shift where, we finally get Bruce Banner, and he, interestingly, despite some Bruce coming through the Hulk, doesn't seem to know what had been going on before he turns back into Bruce. So we're kind of playing a little bit hard and fast with the rules of, I guess, when he can remember what he did
mm.
in whatever his last version of himself was. But he has no idea what was going on with this whole Sakaar thing until he turned back into Bruce and had to be filled in.
Yeah, I think it's very clear from what happens later on that the Incredible Hulk doesn't have access to Bruce Banner's genius in any capacity whatsoever.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a split there brain wise. And it's almost like he, as you say, is learning from scratch. He is essentially a child and he develops a lot in Thor Ragnarok, but he's nowhere near what Bruce Banner's like. And so I guess his version of recording events might just not keep as much information as Bruce Banner's,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
It's like
his
two different
memory.
hard drives
Yeah,
almost.
exactly.
um,
And the second one's only got like 5 megabytes on it or something.
exactly. It's like my MP3 player from
Yeah,
12 years
it's
ago.
got one song on it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think this is another standout moment for Bruce once he does turn back into Bruce, and he's finds himself in this situation where he's a revenger now. He's
Mm.
got to stand alongside Thor and his new group to kind of save the universe, so to speak. um, and he, whether he likes it or not, he's stepping up as Bruce, and we're starting to see sort of that difficulty and him losing control a little bit about when he can turn back into the Hulk when he wants. We see him kind of plummet down to the Rainbow Bridge, I believe it is, and he thinks he's going to land very gracefully as the Hulk. Instead, he just has this big Bruce Banner crash landing.
Yeah.
The beginning of the real problems for him that we'll see later in Infinity War. But a real coming into his own a little bit, that maybe there is a place for both Bruce and the Hulk to fit into this world and do some good, and it's not on some far corner of Earth. Maybe it's beyond. That's sort of what we learn here.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think throughout all of the movies, the biggest opposition that both characters have is each other,
Mm.
and just fighting to be themselves all the time. And Venom's kind of different because he's kind of, they show that Venom can't survive outside of a host.
Right.
They might say he needs to keep his character alive, whereas the Incredible Hulk kind of doesn't care as much.
No. Well, I mean, there was a mention back in the first Avengers movie, Got Real Dark, where Banner says that he tried to kill himself. He shot himself in the mouth with a bullet, and the other guy spit it out, is what he
Mm,
said. So, I mean, I guess the insinuation is that the Hulk that lives inside him refuses to let either one of them die. Like, he's basically almost impervious to death in a
yeah.
way, or pretty damn tough to kill, especially when he doesn't want to be. Um, but I mean, we get to see Bruce with his head held high, and we get to see Bruce and the Hulk have their moments here, and things seem to be on a positive note uh, until the very end of Ragnarok, when Thanos' ship ascends and the whole galaxy goes to hell.
It did
But
a little bit, didn't it?
it a little bit, just
A
a little
little bit.
bit. But yeah, so then we continue that directly into Infinity War, and this
Mm.
is this is, to me, this is the moment in the MCU, just looking at the MCU in general, where we just know that they know that everyone in the world is watching these movies, because there is no explanation in this movie about, I mean, they just assume that we have all seen Ragnarok, and we
Yeah.
saw that last scene in the credits, and if you didn't, shame on you. And we get that direct continuation at the beginning of Infinity War, where Hulk is now involved in this fight against Thanos and his guys, so to speak. And it's kind of a teachable moment, we'll say, for the Hulk, as he doesn't cut the mustard in this fight. He loses. He doesn't
No.
like that.
Exactly. And as I say, in the original Avengers, he was the game changer. And then in Thor Ragnarok, he basically dominated this entire gladiatorial planet where all he did was fight. And then he had a big impact at the end of that movie as well. And then at the beginning of Avengers Infinity War, he goes up against Thanos, and you're like, okay, the Incredible Hulk's going to make a difference here. He might not win the entire battle, but he's going to win enough for them to escape, and it doesn't happen. And
Yeah.
after that, that's the last we see of that character for the entire film. He's in the film, but he refuses to take part in it.
Yeah, yeah. It's and again, it's going back to that childlike nature of the Hulk. We see
Mm.
Bruce, Bruce is able to escape to Earth and start to warn people about what's coming. But yeah, we never see him as Hulk again in that movie, as much as he tries. It's it's one of those.
Even though
One of
he
those.
was incidentally in the trailer at the end of the movie in that battle in Wakanda, but
Oh,
they put a CGI version of the Incredible Hulk in there, but he isn't really there.
yeah, yeah.
Outrageous.
The things they do to mess with our heads.
I know.
um, but yeah, I mean, again, it is really congruous. Is that the word I'm looking for? It's very much in line with what we've learned about Bruce and the Hulk, and where that relationship between the two is going. And this kind of goes back to what you were saying before. It's this idea, we didn't get the Hulk movie. We're telling
Mm,
the story basically in chunks and chapters throughout these other movies, but there was clearly a story in mind that makes logical sense. So, I mean, I really think that's a remarkable creative accomplishment. That's kind of what this show is about. Um,
mm,
but just to kind of isolate Bruce out of all these movies and see where he has gone, it's just really cool. Now he's back on Earth.
yeah.
But it's a catastrophe, so there's no time to go get a coffee with Natasha and catch up, or we don't, like you said, we don't see any of that again, which is maybe a little bit weird.
Mm,
um I feel like there may have been a deleted scene that surfaced that was a bit more of a moment for them to address each other, sort of that awkward kind of conversation.
mm.
And did you ever see that, or I can't remember if
I
I.
probably did at the time. I have all the Blu-rays. I've got probably the only copy of the Incredible Hulk behind me. That's why no one else can watch it. I've probably got the only one. Um, but
Good for you.
yeah, one thing I was thinking too was, so with a lot of the characters, so Thor's probably the best example of this. You can go into any film and there's a slightly different version of Thor, and
Mhm.
it's kind of the same with the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the first one, you're just getting to know him. The Avengers, you're kind of getting to know him again. Then the second Avengers movie, Age of Ultron, is a romance, sort of. And then you kind of see him at the height of his powers in Thor Ragnarok when he's defeated everybody. But
yeah,
then he completely loses all of his motivation and belief in himself in Avengers Infinity War. And then by the next one, he's a different version of that character again.
yeah, yeah. Another big leap, but yeah,
Mm,
you're absolutely right. And I mean, I would say for one thing, that's a big compliment to Mark Ruffalo and his
mm,
ability to pull off all different sides of this character, from the very dark and dramatic, like we said, to uh, the rom com thing. Which, I mean, if you ask anyone how Mark Ruffalo before he entered the MCU, I mean, I think people are going right to 13. What is it, 13 going on 30?
yeah.
Like, he was the rom com guy for a while. It's just amazing how he's evolved well beyond that. But yeah, all different sides of one character, but all making sense in the course of the
Mm.
story of that character, or those two characters.
Absolutely. And I think that it's the kind of thing where I've still seen people online and even ones that have messaged me on Twitter where they've said, this new Marvel film's coming out. Do I need to watch all of them? And it's like, well, there's like 20 something of them now.
Yeah,
Like it's going to take a while, but it does reward you if you've seen all of these movies. But the character kind of always makes sense in the situation they're in the movie they're in. But
yeah,
also, as you say, there's this massive character arc. And I think because all of these characters have existed for so long in the comics as well that there's been that many versions of them, and they're quite keen to explore as many of them as possible in the movies.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it is intimidating, but again, I mean, if you have the time and the ability to go back, just don't wait, people, because in about 15 minutes there's going to be 8 more movies out. So hurry up
Yeah.
and get cracking on it now. Um, so again, I mean, we don't want to reiterate everything that went down in Infinity War, but we know it ended up in a bad place. Bruce was forced to join the fight on Earth without turning into the Hulk. He was unable to do so. He gets access to the Hulkbuster armor, and he's able to kind of artificially kick some butt. Um, and we see him kind of feeling himself a little bit, like he's kind of excited to join the fight and excited to
Mm.
he's really excited to feel that power of the Hulkbuster. I think we see that in that scene, but to still have full control of his faculties while he's doing it. He's probably, like, why haven't I just been doing this the entire
Yeah.
time?
And I do wonder if that is actually what inspires what happens with the character in the next film as well, because he had that experience of having combat and being more actively involved in the
Yeah.
fights rather than going to sleep for a bit and then waking up when it's finished.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point because, the character of Bruce Banner prior to Hulk, probably throughout his entire life, and even in comparison with Hulk, like he's not a strong guy. Like I think he's portrayed as somewhat of kind of a meek fellow, so to speak, by nature. So, we've seen that happen to characters over the course of time and just people in life where, they get a sense of being powerful, of being capable of defending themselves, capable of fighting, and they like it. They don't want to go back from that. So I think it makes sense for the character of Bruce to be like, if I can't be the Hulk, I have to find another way. I have to find a way to get back to feeling powerful,
Mm.
essentially. So I think that would definitely be a big motivator. So,
And
I
I,
mean,
I think too, after obviously Thanos does the snap and wipes out half the universe,
yeah,
he's probably like, okay, I need to come to some kind of compromise because I probably could have helped more if I was the Incredible Hulk.
yeah, yeah. And that's we'll jump ahead to Endgame now. That's a big part of that early part of the movie
Mm,
is how everyone's coping with this giant loss, and whether it's sadness, whether it's burying themselves in work. um we see Natasha just being obsessed with protecting whatever's left of the earth. uh
mm,
and I think maybe Bruce, those of you who know the story, this is where we see what some call Smart Hulk, what some call Professor Hulk, but he successfully merged Bruce and the Hulk to form essentially a powerful version of the Hulk that still retains, I guess I'd say most, if not all, the mental faculties of Bruce Banner. I don't
mm.
know if it's clear whether he is the exact, like it. I don't know if it was a truly clean transfer. How did you interpret that? Because
Yeah, so I think one problem that they probably faced is that the Incredible Hulk historically gets stronger as he gets more angry, and Bruce Banner isn't really somebody that gets that angry. So I
Mhm.
think he was it was a watered down version of the Incredible Hulk, but I
Yeah.
think it was, I'd say personality wise, it was Bruce Banner. Even later on in the movie, he's pretending to be angry, when they go back in time and he just hits a car and
Right.
makes the alarm go off or something. He's like trying to act like the Incredible Hulk would, but it's not really in him.
Yeah, yeah, he doesn't have that aggressive streak anymore. It's just
Yeah.
not. It's he's too evolved,
So,
essentially.
so it's almost like the Incredible Hulk would rather look like the Incredible Hulk, but have Bruce Banner in charge
Hmm.
than round the other way. Because
Yeah,
he's actually the Incredible Hulk, but I wouldn't say he's necessarily driving the vehicle, so to speak.
right, right. And we see. I mean, the explanation is that this is something, and this is a little bit. You don't find many plot holes in these movies, but I do find it kind of plot hole-ish, I guess, the explanation that he'd been kind of working on this experiment for however many years, he says. Like it's been a long time of him experimenting to try to figure out how to turn himself into this hybrid Bruce Banner Hulk. It feels weird that he would have absolutely lost contact with everybody else up until this point. Like
Mm,
I feel like maybe I would need a little bit more of an explanation to believe the fact that he was able to pull this off in hiding, nobody knowing about it. With the rest of the Avengers for the most part, who are still around, still so active,
mm.
and just kind of letting him fall off the face of the earth because we know
Well,
they
that
can find anybody.
right. Well, that to me is another interesting thing because there's been several films now that, even though we're past the point of Avengers Endgame, have gone back to the time of Captain America Civil War and what happened after that, and various films from various points of view. So obviously we have this 5 year gap where we don't know what happened to any of these characters that they could, if they wanted to, go back and explore.
Right.
And I hope maybe they do someday, either in a series or a movie, and maybe
Yeah,
they'll be able to answer some of these questions.
I hope so. I mean, there's so many different stories that you could tell just to get from point A to point B.
Mm.
But I mean, we're here, and now the Hulk is, as you said, he's this hybrid. I mean, I guess he's the personality of Bruce Banner. Like there's aspects of what we see in the movie, especially through the development of his version of time travel, that makes him seem maybe a little less intellectually superior than he used to be. Like it seems like he's definitely kind of muddling through. Not that the idea of time travel is an easy feat, but it almost becomes kind of a joke in that moment of him experimenting with it, that he's kind of a screw up as far as developing this time travel situation. He
Right.
turns Ant-Man into a baby, and and then an old man, and he he kind of doesn't care about him being a baby. He says he'll grow. They're like, no, turn him back. um but
But I think that's another great example of where he can be in these really comedic scenes.
Yeah. Oh, it was absolutely. Yeah, it's great, right? And also, welcome for a movie, really a couple movies that have so much darkness to them.
Yeah, they
Just
really did.
yeah.
I completely agree.
Um, but as you said, and it's almost like even beyond losing the aggression, he's almost gone Hollywood a little bit. Like everyone knows who he is. The
Yeah,
fans are,
he's
the
enjoying
kids are.
the celebrity. He's really enjoying it, isn't he? And posing, and it's kind of. I think it's just another funny scene too, where everyone just wants to have a selfie with the Incredible Hulk, and it ignores the table full of Avengers that are sat there.
Right. But again, I mean, not to be nitpicky, but another little oddity, people know him. People are
Mm,
approaching him and taking pictures. So he's clearly out there. He's clearly kind of a public figure. But
mm.
yet he's telling his story to, when they go to see him, as if they have no idea what's happened to him over the past 5 years. So, the story has to be told because we didn't get to see it. But that was
Yeah,
an interesting way to do it.
but I don't know how tall the Incredible Hulk is, but say he's 7 foot or something. I imagine anytime he goes to get groceries, they're going to go, "Oh, the Incredible Hulk's here." So
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
probably wasn't anonymous at all. He couldn't slip away out of society in the same way that he could have before.
Yeah. That's
So
true.
even though he wasn't necessarily interacting with the Avengers, I think Shang Chi shows that they maybe were still in contact with each other a little bit. Or,
Mhm.
there's massive Earth level threats that happen. They're in contact with each other.
Yeah.
But he obviously goes off on some adventure that we haven't seen yet
Yeah.
to figure out how to blow their entire CGI budget on just being Incredible Hulk the entire time.
Yeah. um so yeah, so I mean, now we're working through this whole idea of time travel and the time heist and so many
Mm,
twists and turns here. Um And, Bruce really steps up. He has probably, I mean, I'd have to say one of his biggest hero moments in the entire MCU, as we get to the culmination of Endgame, because he's the one who is like, I can take the hit of wielding this Infinity Gauntlet. And he's the one who's able to do it and snap everybody back. Um,
mm,
it's a sacrifice. That I think everyone who was battling for that was willing to do, but he's the one who was best suited, willing, and able to do it. And he hurts himself in the process, truly, but I mean, it's a pivotal moment in that war to now bring back everybody at one time. Half the population, including all the heroes that they need to staff up, so to speak.
mm. And not only that, but also obviously Natasha Romanoff as well. He says I tried to bring her back but couldn't.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that could be another reason why he stepped up wanting to do it. I mean, obviously there was a high chance that he would survive doing that.
Hmm.
Although I
More
don't
than
know,
anybody else, anyway.
yeah.
Like he had
Although
the
I don't know
best.
necessarily if people knew what the entire effects of that would be at that point. 'Cause obviously Thanos did it, but most of them weren't there when he did the snap.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But I mean, I feel like I don't remember quite what the explanation was. I think there was sort of a general understanding that it would take a lot to survive, or at least that was maybe their fear or their
Mm,
concern or whatever the case
yeah.
may be. So I think there was definitely an idea that I'm the guy who's best suited to do this. Like, we can't just let anybody wield this thing. Like, I'm stepping up. And they win the day. They bring everybody back, and I'm trying to think what happens now. From that's kind of the end of the journey for him. I mean, the battle is won. Everybody comes together for the funeral of Tony Stark, which is the ultimate sacrifice at the end of the film that
Mm.
leads to victory. Um, and that's where, as you said, he says he tried to bring Natasha back, and if anything, that's a nice kind of callback and allusion to the special bond that they did have.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Uh,
agree with that.
yeah. Uh,
And yeah, it was. I think it was a better film. I didn't necessarily enjoy. I loved Infinity War, but I didn't like what they did with the character.
mhm.
Because there was a time when you really wanted to see him step up, and he kind of couldn't. But then I feel like he redeemed himself, or rather, Marvel redeemed themselves with Avengers Endgame. I think it was a much better use of the character.
There's so much going on in so many of these movies that it's so hard to be critical. I mean, I think if there's anything that was a little bit challenging about his storyline when we got to Infinity War, it's that this idea that he got beat, the Hulk got beat, and he didn't want to come back out and play or fight. I think that's kind of us filling in the blanks a little bit. I don't know that that was expressly, if it was expressed clearly in the movies, and maybe that's why it felt a little bit weird in the movie. Like, we
So,
had to kind of go back and think about that. And
well, there was that scene in Avengers Infinity War where he was trying to get angry, and you kind of saw him start to turn into the Incredible Hulk, and he just said no, and then went away again. So there was a bit of that struggle.
right, but I don't think we were ever really truly told clearly why. I mean, I think it's fair to assume, like you said, that he got beat and he didn't like it, and now he's not
Mm,
coming out of his room.
mm,
Um, but we kind of have to connect those dots ourselves. And again, I think that's just the case of so many different characters to juggle. Um, a lot of which have had the advantage of having a lot more screen time than Bruce Banner had over the course of the years. Um, but maybe just slight bumps in the road that are going to come when you're telling these stories in the midst of other people's stories. So,
mm.
the important and the cool part is that we got to this really good place where he kind of, I mean, it feels like a fitting, I don't want to say ending, he still exists, but a fitting place to be where the resolution of the battle is coexisting. And that's sort
Mm.
of now what Bruce and the Hulk are working on.
Mm. Yeah, I agree with that. It was kind of, I feel like from this point on, he might take a step backwards. I don't know, but it was kind of the sense I had from the end of that movie, which retired a lot of the original characters.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of felt like that for him too, because obviously he'd injured his arm and it was in a sling.
Yeah.
And you didn't know if that meant that he was permanently out of action, or if we were going to get a one-handed Hulk from now on, or what was going to occur.
Yeah, yeah, we really don't. We still don't. I mean, that's the last we've seen of him. We don't know. Um, all we do know is, to my understanding, the next time we're expected to see him would be in the She-Hulk uh, Disney Plus series. Is that?
But we have seen him once since that. So you've seen Shang-Chi?
Yes. Oh yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, so end credits, we catch up. So
Right,
this is
right.
another so we're getting into spoiler territory now. If anyone hasn't seen that movie,
Yeah.
and just going to acknowledge the fact if anyone's watching, my headphones keep falling out. So you can turn that into a drinking game if you want to. How many times have they fallen out in this chat? So in the Shang-Chi end credits, we catch up with Bruce Banner and some of the other characters, and interestingly, there's been a separation again. So he's no longer Professor Hulk, and he's back to Bruce Banner. I did
Mhm.
wonder if that was just to save the budget. If
Yeah,
he
yeah.
appears in future things, kind of expensive to always generate that whole character, I guess.
Mhm.
But he's still very much there. His arm still seems to be injured. I don't know if he's going to work out a way of fixing that. I understood in the past that the Incredible Hulk could kind of heal from most things.
more
Yeah,
easily than the average bear. Yeah. Um, yeah, you're right.
but I mean, he could, as we keep seeing every time we catch up with him, he's worked out something else. So we could see a fully healed version of him, or this could just be a way of him taking that extra step backwards so that when we get to the She Hulk TV show, which is coming out in 2022, then, he doesn't, there's a reason for him not to be taking part in the battles, but he can be an advisor and help this new person, which now has the abilities that he has.
Yeah, yeah, and from what's been talked about and released, there's definitely a strong comedic element to what that show will be. So we
Mm.
know that from seeing all sides of Bruce Banner and all sides of Mark Ruffalo playing him, that's right in the wheelhouse. So um,
I've heard it be described as a half-hour Ally McBeal courtroom show. So I'm not quite sure how that's going to work out, but it should be interesting. And I think there's going to be lots of cameos from, Daredevil and people like
mm,
that. And obviously, Mark Ruffalo has been confirmed he's going to be returning to the show. And
yeah.
I think it should be good. I think it's going to be an entertaining show that will lead on to lots of other things.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly seems like you know, as much as you can get a sense of an actor enjoying themselves in a role, it certainly feels like Mark Ruffalo is has been enjoying playing Bruce Banner. It seems like a joyful performance. It always feels like there's some fun, even if the scene itself isn't fun. And you would hope that he's one of the original Avengers that we don't have to say goodbye to for a long, long
Mm.
time. That he sticks around.
Yeah, I hope so. And I've heard a lot of interviews where he is still speaking about hopefully getting a solo movie at some point in time, and or even a TV show. He sounded quite keen to do that too.
Mm.
So, like the classic 70s TV show, it could be him every week in a new situation, or they could tell it could be like an extended movie over 6 episodes or 9 or 10, or whatever they wanted to do. But I think he's still very invested in the character and is still one that's interesting to him. And there's still so much they haven't done. There's classic storylines in the comics. I think the first time Wolverine, when he first debuted, was against the Incredible Hulk. They could do that again.
Mm.
So they could really tap into these classic stories that haven't been told in movies, and then it'd bring the characters in interesting new ways, because we've seen the X-Men a billion times now, so it'd be good to get a different version of them, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just amazing between them, Fantastic Four. Like, there's so much that no rush. There's so many stories to tell, so many stories they are telling, and so many
Yeah.
that they know that people want to see so badly. But it can all wait. That's like the next 20 years. And fans are happily going to lap it up, and it's a great end to the story because we're going to talk about other story characters in this series where there is going to be a true beginning, a middle, and an end, but we're not ending here. This is just a happy place to where we've landed to tell a story that's going to continue and
Yeah.
hopefully continue for a long, long time.
Yeah, and something you touched upon at the beginning, we can talk about it if you like. There's a rumor at the moment there is going to be, it's not being confirmed by Marvel or Disney in any capacity whatsoever, but lots of people are talking about it. The idea that there could be a new solo Hulk movie being filmed at the end of 2022. So that would either mean, I guess, that Disney's worked out a deal with Universal or maybe bought the rights back. I don't know. But the story that they're thinking about developing is World War Hulk, which is in the comics one where it was a continuation of Planet Hulk, where he'd been out in space and then someone that he cares about, something goes wrong with them and they die. Their character wasn't in Thor Ragnarok, so they're not going to do that. And he came back and he was very angry and basically went to war with the entire planet and the Avengers and everybody versus him. That'd be a
Hmm.
really interesting way of introducing Wolverine, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so many different options with the introduction of the multiverse concept and the fact
Mm.
that we could see these characters we're waiting for come from all directions.
Well,
Every
yeah,
single.
that's the thing too. I mean, this version of the Incredible Hulk that wants to destroy the planet might not be our Bruce Banner. It could be another one
Yeah, yeah, yes. You're
that's just
right.
going around starting wars with every version of Earth and trying to destroy all of them because he's just that angry.
Mm, mm. I mean, the possibilities are endless, and we could be going back. We could. I'm trying to think who else has played. I mean, we could. Lou Ferrigno might be getting a call again. Like we.
So I mean, you say that he did do a cameo in the original Incredible Hulk movie in 2008. He also provided the voice of the Incredible Hulk. And then I don't know if he still does him, but he certainly
Excuse me.
added his voice during the Avengers movie. And I think that Mark Ruffalo did some of it as well. They had sort of shared the lines.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it'd be great to see Lou Ferrigno come back. Absolutely.
yeah. It would be an
Yeah,
amazing thing.
it's badly painted.
That's what they have to do. They need the same way. Like, don't change a thing. Like,
And no
oh
one
my
can beat him.
no.
He's just got no shoes on. He's just running around ripped jeans.
You know
Amazing.
what? So the multiverse, we need like one of those alternate universes has to just be all the heroes that we met in those TV movies. So we need
Yes.
that throwback Thor, throwback Daredevil, whoever else. I think Spider-Man might have been in one. Um,
Well, there was, I think, a 70s Spider-Man TV show. Vaguely
definitely.
remember watching.
Yeah.
So he needs to be there.
Yes, yes, that would be the ultimate showdown. Even if you and I are the only ones who care, I think it needs to be done. You know, they've got room in the budget
Yeah,
just for
everyone that
us.
cares turns up, both of us, and we'll both be there
Yeah,
to watch that movie. I think it'd be good.
I
You
think
know,
it would be
I,
amazing.
I think because Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse won an Academy Award, that's a
Mhm.
massive signifier to Disney that people enjoy these crossovers. Go over to DC right now; they're doing the exact same thing with the Flash movie. Michael Keaton's coming back as Batman.
Mhm.
So there's all these different versions and interpretations of the characters that people love. And the great thing about this is with the multiverse idea is saying that actually they're all the real character and they all exist. And these universes have continued to grow and expand. And we have the opportunity to go and catch up with other versions of Spider-Man that we loved, rumor has it, in the future too.
Yes, rumor has it.
And
Eventually, we're
lots of photos and videos and interviews. And yeah, have it.
shh, quiet. um, well, look, I mean, hopefully we're going to have a lot more to talk about. I'd love to have you back on the show in the future because we've got
Yeah.
so many more characters to discuss. Think long and
There's at
hard.
least several more.
Yeah, at least.
I think Spider-Man, when I think Sony own the rights to like 800 or 900 characters
Oh
just
my.
because they have Spider-Man.
Yeah, yeah. Just all the
We'll
characters
just do all
associated.
of them.
Okay,
Let's just do
cool.
that. Yeah.
I don't need. I can quit my job. I've got. I
Yeah,
need to clear my schedule, but.
we can set aside a day to do this. I don't think it will take long.
Well, this has been an amazing first outing. So I want to thank everyone who rode with us for this one because these are long, deep stories that we have to go through. We
Mm.
did not get detail oriented at all with this thing, and we've still been talking for a long time because there's just so much to cover.
And honestly, this is a lot. If you haven't seen the other Marvel movies, this is a much quicker way of catching up.
That's true. That's
I
true.
say you
Good
just spend
point.
an hour doing it rather than 48 hours or something.
Yeah, that's right. So use that time you saved and I don't know, call your mom, spend time with your kids, whatever your
Yeah.
situation is, do something, play outside. But as for now, like amazing, Sarah. Thank you so much for this conversation. We want people to check you out. I know there's a million ways to do it. The one that I'm remembering in my head is SarahO'ConnellShow.com. That goes right to your YouTube.
It really
Correct?
does. That's correct. So if you SarahO'ConnellShow.com, or if you go onto YouTube, just type in Sarah O'Connell Show and you'll find hundreds of interviews with me speaking to actors, directors, comedians, musicians, authors, magicians, animators, wrestlers, even really sort of in-depth interviews celebrating their entire career. You can also find me on Twitter at Sarah A _Connell, CONNELL. I'm Sarah O'Connell Show on Instagram and Facebook, and you can also find me on Clubhouse, and I've just joined TikTok, which is very exciting as well. I'm basically on most of the things, and on this now.
Yes. And I appreciate you even more for that because you are pretty freaking busy. So thank you for taking the time to do this. And again, thank you guys for checking us out. We're going to do a lot more of these and we're going to cover this whole damn thing. We're going to cover the entire multiverse when all is said and done. So just subscribe, please. YouTube.com at Jerry Strauss. And thanks. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry, for inviting me on your show. It's really exciting to be on here, and I'll very much be subscribing myself and looking forward to future episodes and coming back on to speak about more characters or catching back up with Bruce Banner as well. Everyone subscribe, comment, like, all that good stuff. Check me out too, and follow both of us in life on the internet. And yeah, have a good day, and thank you for watching.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you all. We'll see you next time on Marvel Breakdown. Thanks, guys.